Kimberly Cook is a family law attorney and the CEO of Dovetail Conflict Resolution, a divorce and family mediation firm located in Chicago. She's also the founder of Grown Girl Divorce, a divorce resource company that educates and empowers Black women through divorce. Now, prior to her current roles, Kimberly maintained a distinguished legal career as a litigator at one of the country's premier divorce firms, where she represented high-profile clients. In addition to her work, Kimberly shares her legal education and experience with the community as an adjunct professor, speaker, and mentor. Kimberly's been featured in publications including Crain's Chicago, Black Enterprise, Thrive Global, and Business Insider. You can listen to Kimberly weekly as she educates and empowers listeners as the host of the Grown Girl Divorce podcast. Kimberly, welcome.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm excited to chat about saving money in divorce. This is really exciting. Thank you.
I know it's always a great topic. We're talking about finding the right attorney for your budget. And I know that everyone is really concerned about finding great representation. So if you're looking for an attorney, you want, of course, the best attorney for you.
Yes.
But how do you do that within your budget, right?
Yes. So here's the thing, right? You cannot go into it thinking that the most expensive lawyer is going to be the best lawyer for me. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to wreck your finances from the outset. There are great lawyers at every price point. Think of it like housing market or buying a car. Every budget has a great option for them. It's just about identifying what are my needs, but actually what's my budget? So what's your budget, and be honest about what your budget is, and let that be your guide first. And then we find you the right lawyer within your budget.
Okay. Depending on who you listen to, you might hear that the average divorce costs $15,000 to $30,000 in legal fees. What's your sense of that? Is that accurate?
No, that is accurate. I would say, actually, and let's be very clear here. That's not including like acrimonious divorces, right? So we're talking about your standard divorce, even in not high conflict cases. That's the average when you consider litigation cost and fees. And it's important to keep in mind that also depends on where in the country you live. Because if you're living in certain major cities like LA, New York, Chicago, Miami, that number is really going to be closer to, 25 to 35 average. If you're in other areas, then the average comes down a bit. But it is very expensive across the board. So you should be prepared for that going into it.
I don't think people realize how quickly $10,000 can evaporate with your attorney. And I think that attorneys get a really bad rap that they're trying to run up the fees, or they spent all of this money on mine and it was just some emails that they were answering and things like that. It's really hard for people who are getting divorced, isn't it?
It's very hard. But here's, I think, what people lose sight of. There are two components to the billing aspect. There's your retainer, and then there's the hourly billing rate. You have to pay attention to what the hourly billing rate is. So even if your lawyer says, it's a $10,000 retainer, there's a huge difference between someone whose hourly rate is $500 an hour than someone whose hourly rate is $700 an hour, right? That money goes much faster. The other thing is this: just because it's the hourly rate, keep in mind that you're billed in increments. So when you're working with a lawyer, you should understand how they bill in what increment dynamics. So I've had a lot of people say, well, we weren't on the phone for an hour and I still got charged $100, or I sent an email and I still got charged $75. Well, yes, there's a cost, and it's a fraction of what that hourly rate is. So you should be very clear about what's the hourly rate against then the retainer. Also, the retainer is not generally a flat fee. Flat fee means it's one cost, you'll get the services within that cost, right? Or within that fee. Generally, when we're saying a retainer, that's the money that is being held and billed again, so they don't have to keep kind of coming to you once a month saying, hey, here's what we billed. that's drawn down, the retainer is drawn down. And once the retainer has been exhausted, then you either replenish or you pay monthly. So understanding those dynamics are really important. But if you want to save fees, think about what's the hourly range that I would feel comfortable working within and then go from there.
When people ask me how much an attorney should cost them on an hourly basis, I tell them you could probably find someone as cheap as $150 an hour, maybe all the way up to five, six, $700 an hour. Do you feel like that's a valid range?
Oh, well, again, I say it has a lot to do with the region, right? So I'm hearing $150 an hour. And frankly, I don't know anybody who's billing at $150 an hour right now.
Not in
Other,
Chicago.
not in Chicago. This is right. Now, that said, there are law clerks, paralegals, that may be their billable rate. However, you're living in another location, 150 may be kind of the
Mhm.
average. So it's helpful to kind of know where you are. But yes, I would say, at least 150 and then upwards of, I'm going to
Yes.
even say $800 plus an hour. Again, location is going to dictate that range.
I like to say thinking about $250 to $350 an hour is probably a pretty typical range if you're not in an expensive market.
I would agree. I think the other thing to keep in mind, even that 250 to 350, even if you're in an expensive market, that may also depend on the size of the firm because you can get very good lawyers who are at a smaller firm or maybe solo practitioners, even in major markets, who are in that 250 to 350 range. Whereas if you're at a bigger firm or larger firm, they have larger overhead, there are other different structures. And so what you might see would be their mid-level associates at the 250 to 350 or a junior partner. So it also depends on kind of the size, even in some of the, kind of larger, more expensive markets.
And I think it's important to tell people that don't focus only on the hourly rate. It's an important fact that you need to know and understand, but it's not the only thing to take into consideration when you're trying to save money on your legal fees, right?
100%. Listen, don't make the mistake of thinking expensive is better, right? Just because someone is rated at $700 an hour, $500 an hour, that doesn't mean that they're the best lawyer for you. Oftentimes, rates are driven by what their expertise is and what, how long they've been practiced or the billing structure. So don't make the mistake that a lawyer who's at $250 or $300 is not as good as somebody who's at 500. You want to look at other factors. What's their background? What's their education? Are they divorce and family attorneys? Is that their practice area, right? Are they someone who does litigation versus collaborative? So you want to take all of those things into consideration and making sure that you understand that the rate is only one component of it. But if you go in the door saying, I want the most expensive, that doesn't always mean that you're going to get the best. But what it does mean is that you're going to have a hefty bill that you're going to be responsible to pay for at the end of the day.
Okay, that's all about billing rates. Let's talk a little bit about the process of finding an attorney that works within your budget. When do we start looking for the lawyer if we're considering getting divorced?
As soon as you're thinking about getting a divorce, because at this point, you're not under kind of the time clock or pressure. You're giving yourself the ability to think through, what am I looking for? Am I comfortable with someone who's really litigation heavy? Do I want somebody in mediation? And so give yourself the opportunity to kind of research and explore. That's different if you're in an emergency situation and you've got to find somebody fast, because then you don't have that kind of time. But if you've got some time, now is the opportunity to really kind of chart out for yourself, what am I looking for in a person? Put their cost aside for a moment. But what do I looking for, right? Am I looking for male, female, non-binary? Am I looking for somebody who is really savvy with math? Am I looking for somebody who is, a big screamer? Am I looking for somebody who is just really empathetic and easygoing, right? Put all of these traits and attributes down that we don't often think about, And think about, here's what my ideal lawyer would
Right.
look like, and then go from there.
Well, this is a great comment because I have a case I'm working on right now where there are some complicated financial issues. And my client got an attorney who's a very nice person, very smart person, but her expertise is in child custody. And she's very weak on financial issues. And so we're having a little bit of a problem. She's doing great on the child custody side, but now we're getting to the financial issues and I'm finding we're struggling. And so that would have been something important for my client to dig into when she was interviewing this attorney, right?
100%. You have to kind of look at your unique situation, but also look at your kind of weaker areas, right? So if you're not somebody who yourself is kind of comfortable with finances, then you really want to make sure that whoever you work with can kind of balance that out for
For
you.
sure.
Now, that doesn't mean that just because somebody is stronger with the parenting matters that they can't kind of pull their weight, but you certainly want to ask what their experience is, especially in consideration of your unique circumstances. And what's also important to keep in mind, depending on the size of your firm, you might have different lawyers who bring different strengths to the actual case.
I have my own opinion about this, but what do you think about how many lawyers someone should meet with before they decide who they're hiring?
You always, I think, try to meet with three. You meet with one who maybe that's a recommendation from a friend or a colleague. You meet with another who you have personally kind of researched, right? And then you meet with a third, and that third is going to come from when you meet with one and two, who they refer you to, right? And so you think about having met with these three individuals, how are they different? How are they similar? What do I like? What makes me the most comfortable? And then I think you're able to make a decision. What I will say is, you start finding yourself meeting with 4, 5, 6 lawyers. That's way too many.
Right.
It, things just kind of start getting really messy, and you get just kind of conflicting information, even though you shouldn't. So I'd say try to stick to about three. And from there, if you still are unsure, then do one more. But really, three is usually, I think, a good number.
Three is my number as well. I was curious, you said that third attorney would be someone that you were referred to by one of the two attorneys that you met with. So you
Yeah.
think, I've never thought about this before. Asking an attorney you're meeting with, do you have a recommendation of who else I might consider using for my divorce?
Yes, yes. You ask them for that as well as a mediator, right? And you just say, I want to be very upfront. I'm really interested and appreciate your time. But as I'm researching, I'd really appreciate if you would give me a referral. Here's the thing, you can tell a lot about somebody by the referral or the response to that. If they give you somebody who they think is garbage, then you don't want to work with them. If you get somebody who says, oh, I don't have any referrals, I'm the best, not the right person to work with either. So, you want to work with somebody who their ego is not, touched by the ask of, is there anybody else who you would think would be a good fit or that I could work with? Because they're confident in who they are, but they also recognize that this relationship is one that has to work for everybody. And I always think, ask the lawyer that you're meeting with, is there anybody else who you could consider for my case?
Does it really matter if a lawyer doesn't practice family law exclusively? If there's someone who maybe does also criminal cases and estate planning work?
Okay, so this is a really controversial one, and I'm going to say my feeling on this. I really feel strongly that family law is a really unique practice area, and so my preference is always you should be working with somebody who at least 80% of their caseload is family law. Those lawyers who do 50% or do some family law on the side, my experience has been that it actually ends up costing the client more because they are not either in the kind of the flow of family law and the nuances that are required. They don't have kind of the same kind of, back and forth rapport as sometimes how family law lawyers interact and engage, or they're spending a lot of time on areas by which practitioners in family law would otherwise kind of navigate their client around or be able to kind of short form. So I think really, unless you're in an area where there's like one attorney who kind of does everything, you really should try to find somebody who, if they don't practice exclusively, they should at least practice 80% of their caseload. It's family law.
Now, to be clear, I did not know what your answer was going to be to that question, but I agree with you. I think it's important to get someone whose practice is majority family law.
I think so. And I get it. There are great lawyers who do estate planning work. And so you often see those two together. But again, I think unless their majority of their caseload is family, I think you're better served with somebody who really does practice family law, either exclusively or the vast majority.
Okay, so we're talking about finding the right attorney for your budget. Now, one of the most common complaints I hear is that all divorce attorneys are just out to run up your fees. They intentionally create additional conflict to give themselves work to do and make more money. How prevalent do you think this kind of thing really is?
It's not prevalent. Here's what I would say. There's a couple of bad, eggs, and that of course impacts everybody. But I'd say for the most part, family law practitioners really do want to help you through your case. If you've hit into somebody who you find is churning your case, right? Doing unnecessary work or not listening to you, and not kind of following your direction, then now is the time to pivot. But I'd say, in large part, most family law practitioners really are on the straight and narrow and do try to keep your fees within check. But here's the thing, it's important to keep in mind we are professionals. And so we do bill when you email, when you call, when you want to meet. And I understand that this is a very emotional time, but be mindful that your attorney is not your therapist, they're not your friend, they're not your divorce coach. And so make sure that when you're reaching out to them, that you do have a question that they can answer and the legal side of things. And that oftentimes is what we see when people's bills are really kind of, skyrocketing. It usually happens the first month. Everybody wants to talk to the partner. They want to come in. I need 24-hour access. My life is a disaster. Things are falling apart. And we get it. And then you get the bill, and then everybody is questioning why of the $7,500 retainer, $5,000 has now been spent in that 1 month. But when you look at your bill, remember the 2-hour phone call, remember the responses to emails, remember the ask for an emergency filing to go on vacation. Remember those things. So be mindful of what your ask is, because they are professionals and we do bill and charge for our services.
I completely agree with you that by and large, family attorneys are good. They don't need to be padding their bills. They've got plenty of clients. There are a few out there who reflect poorly on everyone, unfortunately. But I tell my clients, first of all, if you're suspicious of your attorney's billing practices, you maybe need to think really hard about your working relationship with them and why you're suspicious of them, because I want you working with someone you trust. But if it's a matter that you just feel concerned, they say, we're going to approach discovery this way, and we're going to do this with subpoenas. And if you say, that sounds really expensive to me, right? If that's your first reaction, you have every right to say to your attorney, can you explain to me why this is important, what this is going to entail, and maybe how much this might cost me, because I'd like to understand. I think if people ask their attorneys more questions, they'd get more comfort with the work that's being done.
I agree. I think the other thing to keep in mind is you have to ask the questions, but be active in your case. When you receive your monthly billing statement, go through the billing statement, review, highlight any questions that you have, and then, not in an accusatory way, ask the question. I just want to understand, what this reference here to this motion is, or I thought we weren't going to issue subpoenas, or can you help me understand? But go through the bill each month that you receive it. There are errors sometimes. We are all human. And so it's okay to ask. Depending on your response or the response from the lawyer, that also will tell you whether or not this is something that you should be concerned about. If you have a lawyer who
Right.
says, sure, let's talk about it, let's walk through it, that's one thing. If another who is very defensive out the gate, then you might start to really kind of think about what the working relationship is. The other thing, to your point, in terms of like asking, questions, that's very true. Ask the questions about what are the steps that we are intending to take so that I can kind of understand what does this look like? Are there options other than a subpoena? But here's the thing, as a client, making demands, I want a subpoena, I want to, have a 10 forensic accountants, I want to have 5 people working on my case. Those things are great, but they come at a cost. So just be mindful of whatever you're asking for. There is a price tag associated with that. There's the upgrade costs, as I say, right? The
Right.
more professionals, the more people, the more ask, we'll do it, but know that it's coming at a cost.
And I think clients need to be mindful about how they're asking the questions and how they're coming across. It is such an emotional time. And I think a lot of clients in the divorce process don't recognize when they're coming across very aggressively.
Yes.
So just step back and try to come across as though you're just trying to find information. You're not accusing anyone of anything. If you can kind of dial back some of the emotion when you're communicating with your attorney, I think it's going to help make some strides with your attorney, get the information you need without creating unnecessary conflict.
What Couldn't agree more. I think the way to do that is every time you think of a question or you're concerned about something, write it down. Don't send the email, just get it down, step away from it, and then come back and read it now and see what the tone is. Because oftentimes you'll read it again and you'll say to yourself, oh, wait, maybe I should dial this back a little bit, or this kind of came out the wrong way. So before you hit send, take a step back and then say, okay. The other thing that I find is it's easy to send a nasty gram, via email. If you really have questions and you really do want to understand and not be misunderstood, that's a great opportunity to then ask for an in-person meeting or, a virtual face-to-face instead of communicating via email. There are things
Right.
that can be lost in the shuffle.
I could talk to you about this for hours. I want to wrap up by asking about the free resource that you have for women, Grown Girl Divorce, the mini guide.
Yes. So it's a mini guide. And so what it is for women who are considering divorce, and it gives you really a good kind of overview of the things to think about, the steps to consider, some of the information that you want to gather, but also having those moments to just kind of take a step back, get your things in order, breathe, but also recognizing that your timing is your timing. So it's available on our site. I believe we're going to share the link so that we have the great information, but it's the Grown Girl Divorce, the mini guide to get you going as you're thinking about or considering divorce.
Yes, we will absolutely link that in the show notes. And I also wanted to link to your divorce coaching services. Tell us a little bit about those.
Sure. So, the great thing about divorce coaching is it's all about action plans. And I love having an action plan. And so I work with clients at any stage of the process to really figure out what's our goal, right? And then what are our steps? Because sometimes things get lost in a shuffle and everybody gets very overwhelmed. So I'm not acting as a lawyer in that capacity. I'm really acting as your coach. And so I'm helping coach you through the different steps to achieving your goal. So it's all about setting out a plan and then, executing on that plan by keeping you accountable, by also being, your sideline support.
I am a huge fan of having a divorce coach. Thank you so much for being here with us, Kimberly. Great material as usual.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.